James Gentile. I'm a professor of English at the college.
When did you come to the college?
I've been here 18 years, so I worked 4 years part-time. I just completed my 14th full-time year.
Was this your first teaching appointment?
No, I had taught at Columbia as a graduate student, Fashion Institute of Technology, and the Harvard College for Women, which was part of University of Harvard.
And how did you hear about MCC?
Well, I grew up in East Hartford, so I always knew about MCC. I think it's evolved over time in terms of its reputation that this is a college that students are actually choosing to attend. At one time, it was a college where students might not be their first choice. I do think it is the first choice for students now. So when I came back, I really didn't know a lot about MCC. I was sending out resumes, and I recall Lois Ryan sent me, actually called me one day. Lois Ryan called me one day and asked if I'd be interested in coming down. And I recall very distinctly, she said, "Don't get dressed up," because I'm in shorts and flip-flops. But I wore a tie anyway. And pretty quickly I was hired to teach two 101 classes. So it was very exciting to actually be here to start teaching at the college. I was surprised. I recall when Lois said, "I'm on the old campus." I actually imagined that she was on Hartford Road. So I drove down to Hartford Road, actually prepared to do this, but didn't see any sign of MCC on Hartford Road. Discovered that the old campus meant the lower campus where we were teaching at the time.
So having taught at several institutions of higher learning in New York and Hartford College for Women, did you notice a difference in the type of students you were working with at MCC?
I would say that every student brought certain joys as a teacher, and I actually have never had a bad experience at MCC in terms of teaching students. I've taught developmental and composition here. I've had some really nice relationships over time with students. I think what I like about MCC is being in the community. Once people learn you've taught here, they tell you that they were students here, they had such a great experience. It might be in a hospital, it might be at a grocery store, might be in a dental office, but people have really positive experiences at MCC. It's a good feeling to feel part of this academic community.
So you were an adjunct for several years, and then I assume a full-time position was available?
That is true.
Do you remember who was on the search committee?
I do. It was Sue Eward, Kathy Pataro, Mariana Nauduremo, Andy Paterna, and I think it was Carl Antonici, who was one of our librarians at the time. And I do remember I remember it very distinctly because I had to do a teaching demonstration, and I didn't have a lot of time to put into planning the teaching demonstration, so that the best thing I could do is Xerox something that a student had given me and actually workshop with the committee. And that was probably the best decision I made because it was the closest to what teaching at MCC would really be like. You know, really working one-on-one with students, identifying their needs, and being very text-based in our approach to students.
So clearly the search committee was impressed with not only your teaching demonstration, but the responses to the questions.
I guess so. 14 years later, I would say I hope so.
Do you have a philosophy of teaching?
Well, I think just meeting every student where he or she is at as a student. I'd like to think that what we teach is we teach a discipline that can be viewed as a skill-oriented discipline because we're teaching students how to read and write, but I think we're also teaching students how to think and how to gain confidence in themselves. A lot of students, especially in developmental reading and writing, have never had positive feedback in their English classes from their instructors, and they feel they can't do it. And one of my jobs really is to give them enough confidence to make them competent at the very least, but I hope to make them talented. You know, the joy is when a student comes in before graduation and says, "You're the teacher who turned me on to reading. I never liked to read, and now I like to read." Or I just feel a little more confident of teaching. I was reading this article just a couple of days ago, And it was talking about Charles Ruffson, who founded the Revlon Company. And someone once asked him, "What is your product, Mr. Ruffson?" And he said, "On the factory floors, my product is cosmetics. In the department stores, my factory is hope." And I think that really as teachers, we do that also, that we are teaching them a specific discipline, but they're giving them self-confidence, hope, a way to look at the world, a way to look at themselves. You know, one of my students sent me a note at the end of last year before he graduated, and he said, "I always remember something you said in the class," and that's the one thing that propelled me throughout my academic career here. And you're always hoping it's something about how to write an essay, but what I had said and what really compelled him is that I encourage my students to do well in college because someday they would want to be able to give their own children the confidence to go to college. So I think is that idea of hope, bringing your students an awareness that they have a voice as writers, as speakers, they have an opinion that's valid, that they should trust in themselves and go out and sort of gain the trust a lot of them have not had. Especially, again, I'm talking about the students that I deal with because it really is, everyone has to take composition. So we see all the students from the really entry-level developmental to the really talented students when they come into our program here.
You just told an anecdote about a student who clearly you had an impact on his life and the way he approaches things. Can you think of other students who you've affected, perhaps students who showed great improvement or went on to really improve their stature and got in touch with you?
Yeah, I think I want to answer it a different way. When you were saying that, I think of students who have affected me also, which is a really beautiful part of being a teacher. When you hear from a student years later and they tell you that they realize what they had planned to do. I still look at my Columbia alumni magazine, which has where people are what people are doing from different classes. And I look for students that I taught, and I recall certain students who said, I really want to be a lawyer, I want to be this, and I discover they are indeed that. And it's a joy when a student comes back and tells you that you helped them get that bachelor's degree. I have one student who's very memorable because she was from Taiwan, and she actually placed in ESL. And she emailed me before the class that she insisted not being in an ESL class. She wanted to prove herself in an English class. It was a developmental class. And I recall very specifically her desire to learn how to speak in class. So in the course of the semester, she would make an effort to contribute to the class. And I could tell my students were turning her off because she was very difficult to understand. And you know that we're pretty accustomed to hearing all types of accents, and we sort of acquire patience over our career as teachers in understanding students. But I could tell my other students were not as patient, were not as capable. But it became clear to them at one point in the semester that she was the only one who really knew what was going on in the class. And I could see from the front of the room that now when she volunteered to say something, everyone was making an effort to really understand what she said. And she was a very hardworking student. And at the end of the semester, a lot of times I'll read a student's essay to the class. And I recall reading her essay to the class at the very end of the semester. And it was a very beautiful story. The story had touched her. The novel we had read had touched her life. And she talked about how it was a story about finding hope in a new land, and that was her own story. And I read the story, and everyone applauded, and then people came up at the end of the semester and hugged her. And I think when we talk about all the things that happen in the classroom that are beyond assessing, beyond measuring, we're always talking about outcomes, which are so important in determining our curricular outcomes, but so many other things happen in the classroom that are difficult to measure, but we know they're happening. And that was one of those instances where I could see something had happened in the classroom that was going to shape the way my students would go out and interact with other people in their own lives. So I think about those moments as a teacher also.
Have you, let me flip some questions that I have in my mind. Who were some of your colleagues over the last 18 years or so, who really stand out in your mind?
Wow, I suspect a lot of people say everyone's a family at MCC. So we really are a family. And colleagues shape you in very different ways because you learn from them and you interact with them. What I've loved about MCC is that it's a collaborative institution. And I recall when we went to the AST, the English department wanted to stay on one floor. We figured out it was possible for all the English people to be on one floor. And at the time, the thought was it was much better for us to interact with faculty from other disciplines. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to, on a daily basis, work with people who teach physics or biology or geology, sociology, psychology, criminal justice. Those are the joys. People stand out for many different reasons. Al Freehite stands out because no one could have given 125%, 10 times over, to the college than Al did. Mike Duramo, just a brilliant guy, one of the first instructors who really took me under his wing as a part-timer. I've worked a lot with Ken Kluchnik on several committees. Ken is inspiring intellectually, and it's really a joy to interact with him, especially on CSET. Lois Ryan first hired me. So many people, I don't like this question because I know I'm going to omit someone, but everyone here is wonderful. Everyone really to work here is wonderful. I think you feel that when we get together as a college.
Let's take a look back from your beginning years here to the present. Have you seen changes in the college, whether we're talking about students, the college culture, or faculty members?
Sure. Wow.
What's changed?
Obviously, the campus has changed, and that I think is an important important starting point. That how we teach has changed because of the geography, which is really difficult to imagine, but the technology has really shaped the way we change. So I think there are really positive changes that have occurred. I recall the first year I was hired as a full-time instructor. That was really when we were rolling out email. And you might recall that we always got these phone messages all the time, all-point phone messages. We very seldom used email. And I remember coming back after the summer, not really having checked email very frequently, and there was nothing. So I can't imagine not even leaving my office for a day and coming back and sometimes almost being overwhelmed by emails. So I see those changes. Obviously, we've grown in terms of the number of faculty here, and I think that we're always straining to best meet the needs of our students. We're always saying we need more faculty. One of the joys for me is to see the part-timers. As a part-timer myself, to start as a part-timer and get hired. When I was the chair of the department, I worked, I hired and was overseeing 60 part-timers. That was a real joy of my life here, and I think the joy of being with the part-time faculty and seeing their dedication, which I'd like to think is unique in the system, is something that has not changed over time. That's consistent. The people are really committed to this school and really want to be at MCC. So I'd say, again, some teaching changes because of technology, but the people are the same. They're always students. Every student brings his own or his or her own challenge to the classroom and joys to the classroom and talents to the classroom, and it's just meeting them.
At some point, I suspect you'll retire, and people will think back about you and your time here. What do you want to be remembered for?
Okay. I would hope people would remember me as a nice guy, as someone who was willing to collaborate and listen to his students and to his colleagues, and someone who really respected the institution and gave a lot to the institution. People always kid me that I'm here all the time, and I am at the college a lot, but it's because I really love my job. This has been a job that's been continually challenging. I could not have expected 14 years ago what the opportunities I would have had at MCC would have been. I've enjoyed being at MCC especially because of certain committees I've chaired on the system-wide level. I've worked with faculty at all 12 colleges. So I know we're changing away from that organizational structure, but I love the fact that we were a system and that I was part of a system as well as part of MCC.
Any additional questions? Is there anything you'd like to add that we have not covered and that you'd like to discuss?
Wow. I think you've covered a lot. It's not the direction you were anticipated you going.
Well, where did you think?
I thought you would ask certain committees I chaired. For example, Center for Teaching was really an important part of my life here and in the system. So I thought you might talk about Center for Teaching.
Well, here's a question.
Okay.
I know you've been involved in the Center for Teaching. Tell us about your involvement and the importance of the center.
Well, the Center for Teaching just celebrated the 25th anniversary of its keynote organization, which is the Barnes Seminar. And I went to the celebratory dinner about 3 weeks ago with Pat Cook. And being in that room with the former chairs of the Center for Teaching, people who had been at the first Barnes, and current faculty, both from here and across the system, it was a real joy to see what Center for Teaching had done and how it grew. When I started full-time, there was a real rethinking of what Center for Teaching would be, and they identified teaching and learning consultants on the campus. Barbara Place and Kathy Peters were the first TLCs, and then I did it for 4 years and then became the system-wide chair for 4 years. That was a real joy and I think an important contribution I would hope I made to the college in terms of identifying the professional needs of faculty and trying to meet them in a variety of ways and interacting with faculty in a lot of disciplines, giving them an opportunity to, again, collaborate across the walls that might exist. We use that word silos a lot a few years ago. And while I was never keen of that metaphor, I do think it's an accurate way that it is possible for a faculty member to become so involved in his own department that he's not as fully aware of what's happening in other departments. And Center for Teaching always allowed faculty to realize that it's finally about the same students taking different classes and how to best meet their needs.
Any other committee work? Well, I know you were department chair. Do you want to discuss your work as chair of the English department?
That was a real joy. I did that for 6 years. As I said earlier, I really enjoyed working with the part-time faculty and still hearing from them now to see certain part-timers that I hired when they were grad students get a full-time job and keep me updated on their careers. One woman I hired just got the Outstanding New Faculty Award at University of Hartford, and she emailed me the award. So that was a joy. I think the fact that I hired 3 part-timers who became full-time faculty members in my department was also a real joy of my time here. At MCC as English was Janine and Tanya and David Caldwell. So that was great to see people that you sort of mentored. I think I would like to think that I mentored some people, and that was a real joy of being here. Other things that I think about in terms of my career that were important to me were getting involved with e-tutoring, working with the Connecticut Distance Learning Consortium. That was, again, one of those unexpected directions I couldn't imagine that when I came here, first of all, that I would be involved in using technology at all to teach, because it's not the way we ever thought about teaching until we really moved to the campus. I remember Alice Savage asked me when I was the chair to write a report for her on how English faculty were using technology. And that report was kind of a stretch because we really had 2 faculty who were teaching online, no hybrid courses, really no web enhanced. People might have been using the document camera. We had just moved into the building, but our idea of technology and instruction was very limited. And it really wasn't approached as something that could enhance teaching. It was more a supplement, a simplification of some of our tasks, a way to distribute materials. And I think we've seen, and I'm not speaking now for the people who are teaching online, but for those of us who hadn't really thought about using technology in that way, it wasn't a direction we could imagine ourselves going into. And now it's just a given that at the very least you're going to post your syllabus and do a little more online, have discussions online. Students assume that you're going to be teaching in some way online. It's the culture out of which they've come. So it's not a direction I could have imagined. CTLC had asked me to work on an online tutoring program that has subsequently grown across the country. And I actually worked with Bonnie Reidinger at the time, who was a post-university. So working with her and then actually ending up being on the search that led to her important role at the college and the system was another joy. So to see projects continue and to hope that they would continue once I'm gone and continue to grow and develop and change to continue to meet students' needs is something I look back on positively about being at MCC.
Anything else?
Gosh, Bob, I think you asked me a lot. So
I think we've covered.
Okay, I hope that gave you something that you can use.
Wonderful overview, and I'm glad you prompted me to ask you about the Center for Teaching, because
Okay.
I don't know that we've discussed that with the previous 90 people.
Okay.
So that's an important part of
Okay.
the here.
Very good.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.